Hi, I'm Stephanie Gupta, AAAE Senior Vice President for Security and Facilitation. Today, I'm joined by James Gregory, Acting Assistant Administrator for Strategic Communications and Public Affairs at the Transportation Security Administration, to discuss Real ID. In 2005, Congress passed the Real ID Act. It established minimum security requirements for driver's licenses and limited access to federal facilities as well as to commercial aircraft in phases, with commercial aircraft being the final enforcement phase. Over the years, DHS has delayed enforcement of the Real ID Act as states and territories made the appropriate changes to their driver's licenses. However, DHS has now indicated that there will be no further delays. This means that 1 year from now, on October 1, 2020, every adult passenger will need a Real ID compliant driver's license or another acceptable form of identification, such as a valid passport, a military ID, or a registered traveler card, in order to fly in the United States. Jim, thanks for being here. Can you tell us why having a Real ID is so important right now?
Sure. Stephanie, I think it really goes back to the 9/11 Commission and their mandate that the federal government set standards for the issuance of driver's licenses. This is about making sure that terrorists cannot evade detection by using a fraudulent ID, right? So for us, it's really about, it's a critical piece of Homeland Security.
Great, thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Most Americans, when they get to the TSA security checkpoint, show a driver's license, but more than 50% of Americans are not familiar with the Real ID requirements, and even fewer have a Real ID compliant driver's license right now.
Right.
So what is TSA doing to get the word out about this upcoming deadline?
Well, we're working hand in hand with DHS and state governments to alert travelers to this pending mandate. In August, just past August, we've started alerting travelers as they're approaching the traveler document station at the airports. When they first approach a TSO, that TSO is going to look at their ID and they're going to determine, is it a driver's license? Is that driver's license compliant or not? They're going to look for that star. Generally, there's a star in the proportion of the ID, and they're going to say, if it's not compliant, they're going to alert that traveler to that fact. Some other things that we're doing is we've co-hosted a lot of events with media alongside the various DMVs across the nation to get into the nightly news so people are seeing it there. We also have a robust social media campaign, but it's really important for all stakeholders out there to be alerting passengers that this deadline is coming.
Well, airports certainly are one of your stakeholders, and we, like TSA, are trying to educate the traveling public. For example, the Virginia DMV hosted some mobile enrollments for Real ID at both Washington Dulles and Washington National Airports recently, and other airports are putting out signage and handing out information. What are some of the examples that you're seeing at airports that you would recommend others might consider replicating?
Well, I think, the important thing is to provide a lot of different touch points for travelers as about this particular requirement. The signage is great. Maybe even the audio, the announcements over the intercom, alerting passengers that this is coming, partnering with the DMVs to provide mobile enrollment sites. Those are all great things to help people better understand. It's going to be about making sure that the traveler has, frankly, 8 to 10 different touch points about Real ID before it's going to register, because there's so much other noise out there, so many other sources of information. The more that they hear about Real ID, the more likely they are to take that step and go to their DMV and get those Real ID compliant licenses.
That is so true. Last week, U.S. Travel Association put out a survey results where they found that about 500,000 people could be turned away from TSA checkpoints when this deadline goes into effect if we don't get the word out. So assuming those numbers are right, is TSA looking at some type of alternate procedure to screen people that don't come forward with a Real ID compliant driver's license? And if so, what would that be?
Well, right now, my recommendation is travelers should not assume that there's going to be some sort of workaround for this come October 1st, 2020. We're moving forward with this. We understand that there are these surveys, and that there's a lot of risk associated with having many passengers out in the public area, large groups like that. Our focus right now is really making sure that people are aware of this pending deadline and that they're out there getting their Real ID compliant licenses.
Well, Jim, thank you for updating both AAAE and our airport members on what TSA is doing to get the word out about Real ID and giving us some ideas of what we should be doing as well. Appreciate that.
All right.
And it looks like we all have a lot of work ahead of us to make sure that travel will not be disrupted when this mandate goes into effect. For more information about TSA's efforts on Real ID, you can go to the TSA website